Well, hey there, friends. I'm your host, Penny, and this is Criminally Nerdy. What's cooking good looking? Hope you all had great weekends and are ready to take the week on by storm. I'm recording this before the Season 2 premiere of House of Dragons, so I am on pins and needles, ready to be front row for whatever Queen Rhaenyra and Daddy Daemon's next move is gonna be. Don't judge me, they're both just, swoon. If you haven't seen Emma Darcy, who plays Queen Rhaenyra, out of costume, do yourself a favor and go look them up. They are literal perfection. That is all. In podcast world, thank you all for sticking it out the last couple of episodes. Whatever cold or allergies that decided to be a stage 5 clinger on my vocal cords has finally taken a hike. I'm still working on some listener engagement stuff, so you'll be hearing about that in the weeks to come. In the meantime, of course, please keep telling your people to listen to the show. This is where nerds converge. Also, I still have a few Criminally Nerdy Pride stickers left, so if you'd like one, please feel free to shoot me an email with your address and I'll get one out to you. This episode is airing on June 17th, which is National Take Your Cat to Work Day. I mean, if you're gonna go into work today, may as well take your cat. I'm sure everyone in the office will be interested to meet them after you showed off their wedding pictures last week. It's also National Harrison Day, National Jan Day, and Apple Streusel Day. So, call into work. Enjoy some apple streusel while binging all the Star Wars movies in honor of Harrison Ford, followed by the dinner party episode of The Office so you can take in all of the wonderful craziness that is Jan. If your boss can't appreciate Star Wars and The Office being prioritized over your workload, is it even somewhere you want to be working? In today's episode, we will be discussing the heartbreaking and senseless murders of 2 young women with their entire lives ahead of them who were coldly tossed away like garbage behind a dumpster. The investigation into their deaths took many twists and turns, but wound up landing shockingly close to home. This is the case of Britney Cosby and Crystal Jackson. Some of my sources for this case were Galv News, Patch.com, the Black and Cold podcast, the Black Girl Gone podcast, the TV shows Someone You Thought You Knew, and See No Evil. If you follow me on social media, you know I do post photos along with each episode, sometimes including crime scene photos after the fact. I tell you this to warn you, since I know some people are interested, maybe it's a new case they haven't heard of before, and they want to go looking for information themselves. There are active crime scene photos and body cam footage that accompany this one that are very heartbreaking. Most of the cases I cover do, but I don't include those things on social media. So please, with any case you hear, mine or elsewhere, Google with caution. On March 17, 2014, a delivery driver was making his rounds when he stopped at Fisherman's Cove Food Mart in Port Bolivar, Texas. He noticed what looked like 2 mannequins outside of a dumpster out back. Guys, if being a true crime nerd has taught me anything, it's that it's never a mannequin. The driver went inside to make his delivery and mentions it to the manager. Knowing they hadn't thrown out anything that would even resemble a mannequin, they went to take a closer look. As they neared the dumpster, it became clear that they needed to call police. Detective Danny Kitchens of the Major Crimes Division of the Galveston Sheriff's Office was the first to get the call. He made his way to the Port Bolivar Peninsula, which is only accessible by ferry. As he arrived at the scene, he was joined by Sergeant William Kilburn. They discovered 2 intertwined bodies. One was a young African-American woman. She was lying on her back and had a gunshot wound to her right temple with the exit wound behind her left ear. The other body was laying on their stomach with a blood-soaked sheet covering their head. It wasn't until they removed the sheet that they were able to determine that this was also the body of a young African-American woman. She had multiple blunt force trauma injuries to her head. It was a truly brutal killing. So brutal, in fact, that they were certain this crime was personal. The lack of blood quickly led them to the conclusion that the 2 women had been killed elsewhere and that their bodies had been brought to this small, secluded area. The tire tracks found at the scene suggested that whoever had left them there was trying to get in and out as fast as possible. Neither woman had identification, so finding out who they were would be the first of many steps in this investigation. The dumpster behind Fisherman's Cove happened to be in front of an abandoned hotel, so there was no lack of items to comb through. Thankfully, they got lucky. Among the items found were a green and white shutter with blood splatter on it, which did not belong to the hotel or any of the surrounding buildings, a piece of paper wedged between the shutter and the wall where it was left with a bloody fingerprint, and a piece of mail. The mail had a name and address. Britney Cosby from Houston, Texas. One of the women had the name Britney tattooed on her chest, so the address was the most credible lead thus far. When they arrived at the home, they were greeted by 92-year-old Annie Lee Cosby. Once inside and seeing photos displayed of Annie's family, they determined that one of the victims was indeed Britney Cosby. When they informed her about the discovery of Britney along with the body of another woman, Annie was absolutely crushed. She was Britney's great-grandmother. Britney's parents had split up when she was only 4 months old, and Annie had raised her ever since. Britney was a 24-year-old barista at Starbucks. Though Annie had a full-time caretaker named Cora, when she wasn't working, Britney spent much of her time taking care of her home and her great-grandmother, who she adored. When she wasn't working or taking care of Annie, she was spending time with her girlfriend, 24-year-old Crystal Jackson, and her 5-year-old daughter, Zanaya, both of whom lived with Britney and Annie. Britney and Crystal had been together for 2 years after meeting in 2012 while riding the bus. They had an immediate connection. They started dating, and at some point, Crystal and her daughter moved in with Britney and Annie. By all accounts, they were in a happy, loving relationship. In fact, with Annie's help, they had recently taken a big step together. They purchased their first car, a silver 2006 Kia Sorento SUV, the perfect family vehicle. During their conversation with Annie, Britney's father, 46-year-old James Cosby, arrived home. He moved into the home just a few months prior in October of 2013. When Annie and police told him about what happened to Britney, he breaks down saying, "No, no, no," and asking investigators through tears what happened. When Annie and James were asked if either of the women had any enemies, they both said no, everyone loved them. Police were certain that the other body found at the scene was Britney's girlfriend Crystal, so they began trying to piece the women's last known movements together. Annie said she hadn't seen them since the previous day and assumed they had left for work. James also said that when he last saw the two, it was around 7 o'clock in the morning. They were doing their usual routine of getting Zanaya ready for school, but left without her for some reason. He found this odd because they never left without her. He assumed they had just run to the store. He told police he had been at home that day and that night, but they had never returned. When they didn't, Annie contacted Crystal's parents to come pick Zanaya up. While they were talking to Annie and James, investigators mentioned that they also noticed a missing shutter on the front of the home, a green and white shutter. James said that it had been broken and had recently been given to a handyman named Pepe to have it replaced, and provided investigators with his address. Police put out a bolo on the women's vehicle and pull up Crystal's information. Once they have her address from her license, they are able to get to the home of her parents, Ivan and Mary Jackson, to inform them of what had happened to their daughter. Though upset, Ivan reveals during his interview that he is a local preacher and he highly disapproved of their relationship. He made no secret about disliking Britney, saying she was nothing but trouble and was the reason that his daughter thought she was a lesbian. He told investigators that Britney wasn't even allowed in his home and that he told his daughter, quote, "You're not a lesbian, you're just fucked up in the head." When Mary was asked, she said she had accepted that her daughter was gay and did not let it affect their relationship. Ivan also admitted to police that he had a gun, and when he found out that they had left Zanaya alone, he was so upset that he thought about grabbing it and going to confront the women. He said he did not end up doing this because his wife had talked him out of it, which she confirmed. Still, police saw this as a pretty big red flag and switched gears to treating Ivan as a suspect. They collected his weapon to have it tested and requested that he come in the next day for a formal interview. While evidence is being processed, investigators follow up on their other lead, handyman Pepe. When they arrive at the address provided by Britney's father and confirm that he is the person they are looking for, they quickly rule him out. Pepe was an elderly man who could only walk with the assistance of a cane. There would be no way he could savagely beat an adult to death and then move 2 adult bodies. Ivan and Mary came in for second separate interviews the next day. Ivan continued to maintain his innocence, but does not seem to hold back on his feelings about his daughter being involved in a same-sex relationship. He stated that he loved his daughter very much, but his staunch disapproval put a lot of stress on Crystal and Ivan's relationship. Police determined that until ballistics are back from his weapon, they cannot rule him out. Mary maintains Ivan's alibi and confirms that she knows how he felt about his daughter's relationship, but she did not think that he would ever hurt her. They also ask Mary about Zania's father. Mary tells them that Crystal has sole custody and that the father, Reginald, was not involved in her life at all. To cover all of their bases, investigators bring Reginald in for questioning. He admits that he is indeed not involved in his daughter's life, and that the last time he had seen her was when he happened to bump into Crystal and Zania at the grocery store about a month prior. He voluntarily gave a DNA sample so that police could rule him out. DNA for Reginald and ballistics for Ivan's weapon come back. Neither are a match, so both men are ruled out. Around the same time these results come back, so do the autopsy reports, which give police a greater insight into the killings. Britney had been struck in the head 5 times with a sharp-edged object, which caused her skull to split open. The first blow was delivered with so much force that it broke her neck. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma, but she had also been manually strangled. Crystal had been manually strangled as well, before being shot in the head at close range, which was determined to be her cause of death. The way the women had been killed led police to believe that Britney had been the main target, as her attack had taken much longer. Crystal's was more hurried, leaving them to suspect that she had seen something she wasn't supposed to or had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sorry if you guys can hear it raining. We're having a nice little storm right now. As they're shifting their focus to Britney's life, they receive a tip from a man who says while walking his dog, he found Britney's wallet on the side of the road. Being a good Samaritan, he mailed the wallet to the address listed on the ID inside and didn't think much else of it. When he saw the women on the news, however, he wanted to let police know in case the information could be useful. He led police to where the wallet had been found, about 1.5 miles from Britney's home, and they were able to get CCTV footage from surrounding areas. They were able to see the women's vehicle passing by the area around 7:30 on the morning they disappeared, which fit James' timeline of when he last saw them. They follow the footage and are able to track the SUV to where it was driven on the ferry at Port Bolivar. It reaches the ferry landing around 9 o'clock that evening. The guard actually flags the car down to let the driver know that the driver's side headlight was out. Though the footage wasn't great, investigators are shocked when they can clearly see a tall, slender man step out of the vehicle. They were able to track down the guard who had been working that night. He was able to recall the vehicle and gave a description of the driver. The guard also noted that the driver seemed nervous and wasn't very familiar with the car. He had trouble rolling the windows up and down, and he was braking harder than he needed to. With the help of a sketch artist, they are able to come up with a composite of the man the guard saw that night. Unfortunately, this sketch does not resemble anyone in either of the women's lives, so police find themselves at another dead end. Until the forensic report comes back on the evidence found at the scene where the women's bodies were. They confirmed that the shutter was an exact match for the shutters at Britney's home. The blood splatter was confirmed to have belonged to Crystal. They also found synthetic hair fibers that matched Crystal's weave. Oh, and they have results on the bloody fingerprint from the piece of paper that was next to the shutter and DNA recovered from the sheet that had been wrapped around Britney's head. It was a match for James Larry Cosby, Britney's father. When they do a little background on James, they find he's got quite the record. He was convicted in 1994 in the sexual assault of a 22-year-old woman. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was released in 2004, but then put back in jail again in 2011 for failing to register as a sex offender. When he was released for the second time in October of 2013, he began living in Annie's home. After his arrival, the dynamic of the home changed. James and Britney had never really gotten along. He spent much of her childhood in and out of prison, so they didn't have much of a relationship, which James made no effort to repair. In fact, Britney once described her relationship with him as estranged. James also made derogatory comments about Britney and Crystal's relationship on a regular basis. He made no secret of his disapproval of them being lesbians. Because things at the house were getting increasingly uncomfortable, the women were planning on getting a place of their own. They had just achieved their first step in reaching their goal by purchasing a car so they would no longer have to rely on public transportation. Detectives applied for a warrant to search Annie Cosby's home. While waiting for it to be approved, they went back to the house to speak with James, but he was actually attending a vigil for his daughter. They instead spoke with Cora, Annie's caretaker. She said that something had struck her as off. She told them that the carport was clean, which had never happened. She had even had her own grandchildren come and clean it up on one occasion because the trash and debris would blow into it. But now, it was spotless. When detectives look around the carport, they can tell that it had recently been cleaned. There were 4 bricks that were just randomly laying next to Annie's wheelchair ramp, so it caught their eye. When they moved the bricks, they were able to see that there were drops of blood on the concrete underneath. While taking a look around, they also noticed drops of blood on the back door frame. Cora had another bit of information about James and Britney that James hadn't shared. The night before the women went missing, James was upset that they were having pizza for dinner while he was having a bologna sandwich. He was already put out that he was having to use the den as his bedroom, so seeing them enjoy a hot meal while he was eating a cold sandwich pushed him over the edge, and he started an argument with Britney over it. Over pizza and a bologna sandwich. Like, did you even ask her, hey, can I have a piece? With the warrant approved, forensic teams got to work. Outside of the home, they found blood on the ground, on the outside door, door frame, and door jamb, as well as on another one of the shutters that was still attached to the home. Inside of the home, luminol lit up. It revealed drops of blood all over. Clothes, shoes, the couch, the floors, and the walls. In James's room, they found ammunition, and they also found it to be the area with the most concentrated amount of blood. Some of the bloodstains hadn't even been removed, so he just crudely covered them with throw rugs. The amount of blood they were able to detect in that room made it possible for them to determine that at least one of the women had been killed in his room. James was brought in for a second interview where he was confronted with all of the evidence they were able to collect from the home. He still maintained his innocence and that he had no involvement in the death of his daughter or her partner. Investigators determined that with the amount of evidence they have, they could charge him with at the very least moving the bodies, so he was arrested for tampering with evidence while detectives continued to build their case. Now in custody, James were able to seize James's phone. The analysis showed that on March 6th, the day before the women's bodies were found, he had made several calls to his girlfriend at the time, Kimberly Pierce. She told them that on that day he had been driving his daughter's car. The two spent the day together until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when she had to go pick her children up from school. Later that night, he called her to pick him up from a Whataburger. Forensic evidence from the home had been returned and showed that the blood inside the home belonged to Britney. The blood on the outside of the home mostly belonged to Crystal. They conclude that Britney had been killed in James's room and Crystal had been shot outside. About a month later, on April 17th, they caught a break when they found Britney and Crystal's vehicle. It was found on a lot where it had been towed after sitting in the parking lot of a strip club, the Ritz. Wouldn't you know it, the Ritz just so happened to be near the same Whataburger where Kimberly had picked James up. An FBI cell phone analyst was able to establish James's whereabouts on the day, which consisted of him being in Houston for the day, then in Port Bolivar later in the evening, and then to the Ritz where the car had been abandoned. Now that they've located the vehicle, they are able to confirm that the driver's side headlight is out, so it is positively ID'd as the one seen on CCTV footage at the ferry. Forensics had even more evidence to work with now. Inside of the vehicle, blood was visible everywhere. There had been no attempt to even clean it. In the back hatch of the car, they were able to find a bullet casing. They also found cigarette butts in the ashtray. The blood splatter and bullet casing proved that the back hatch of the car had been open when Crystal was shot. The blood was confirmed to have belonged to both women. The bullet not only matched the ammunition that was found in James's room, but was determined to have been the one that killed Crystal. And the DNA on the cigarette butts belonged to none other than Mr. James Cosby. James was now charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Combining all of the forensic evidence and witness statements, the prosecution's theory was that on the morning of March 6th, Britney and Crystal were getting ready to leave for the day. Either just before or while Crystal was putting Zanaya in the car, Britney and James got into an argument that turned physical. At this time, James brutally bludgeoned and choked his daughter to death. When Crystal came back into the house and witnessed what had happened, she ran back outside. In a panic, James grabbed his gun and ran after her. She was able to make it outside before she was shot in the head. He used a piece of paper to cover his hand while he removed and carried the shutter that had Crystal's blood on it. He loaded the women's bodies into the back of the SUV and proceeded to spend the day with his girlfriend, who was none the wiser. When she left to pick up her children from school, he drove the car onto the ferry to Port Bolivar, where he disposed of their bodies in the shutter. Once he was back in Houston, he parked the car at the Ritz and walked to a nearby Whataburger, where he called his girlfriend for a ride. All of this is utterly, utterly heartbreaking. This man viciously beat his own daughter to death, shot her girlfriend at point-blank range, and then tossed their bodies next to a dumpster like they were trash. If you're anything like me, I know you're wondering, and the answer is, unfortunately, yes. 5-year-old Zanaya was there. As much as no one wants to have to, investigators needed to know what she may have seen or heard. They brought in specialists to work with Zanaya to see if she could tell them anything about that day. She said that Mommy had told her to stay in the car and that Mommy was taking a long time, so she went inside. She didn't see anyone, but she heard a boom and a buzz. They asked if anyone else was in the house that day, and she said James was there and that she saw blood on his bed and on his floor. She called him a bad guy, and she said, quote, "He just decided to kill my mom and his daughter." If you're trying not to cry after hearing that, it's okay. Cry it out. I did. If you can't right now, don't worry. I probably cried enough for both of us when I watched her interview. The only thing they were never able to produce was the weapon used to kill Britney. Whatever it was, James refuses to say. At the time of the investigation, 307 pieces of evidence were collected, the most that Detective William Kilburn had collected to that point in his career. It was all presented to the jury during the trial, along with expert analysis and witness statements. After only 3 hours of deliberation, on August 10, 2016, the jury delivered a verdict of guilty on 2 counts of capital murder, which comes with an automatic sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Family members told the media that James killed them because he didn't like the fact that his daughter was a lesbian. Britney's own mother stated that he would make near-constant comments that their relationship didn't sit right with him. Others have weighed in saying that he killed them out of sheer jealousy. They were doing well in life and in a loving relationship while he was going nowhere fast. Whatever his motive was, James has never said and still maintains his innocence. These 2 bright, loving, beautiful young women had their lives mercilessly taken away for literally no reason. Whether it was because he didn't like the fact that they were gay or because he was jealous that they were going places in life, it doesn't matter. It was a senseless, hate-fueled killing. What goes around comes around, and someday, it's gonna come for you, James. I can give you all a little bit of sunshine after this storm. Crystal's father, Ivan, lives with the deep regret for the way he treated the girl. He speaks of the love he had for his daughter, and he says that he looks forward to seeing her again someday. Zanaya lives with her grandparents and has an incredible outlook on life. She is positive and hopeful. She remembers that the day her mother was killed, she was supposed to go on a field trip to the rodeo with her class. Instead of letting that be something that keeps her away, she still goes and has fun and says that she thinks about how much fun her mom would be having if she were there with her. Detective William Kilburn has stayed close with the family. So close, in fact, that Zanaya is his goddaughter. And that, my friends, is the heartbreaking case of Britney Cosby and Crystal Jackson. That's all I have for you today, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Like next week, when we'll be discussing a young man whose tragic death put a national spotlight on the need for hate crime legislation and protection for the LGBTQ+ community. Next week's episode will be airing on June 24th, which is the 2nd anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned. That day in the United States will be the nationwide women's strike advocating for reproductive freedom, equal rights, and the fight to end gender-based violence. Those participating will not be attending school or work. If you can't miss school or work on that day, wear red in solidarity. If you are able to participate, there are marches planned across the country, so check your area if you want to attend. As always, if attending, be safe, stay hydrated, and wear your sunscreen. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok now at Criminally Nerdy Podcast, Twitter, X, whatever, at Crime Nerd Pod, or shoot me an email anytime at criminallynerdypodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, keep it nerdy. Pull the lever, Kronk. Wrong lever! This is gonna make me cry. Wait, did I read that last sentence? Why is this one getting to me so bad? Fucking uterus. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. Oh, I gotta stop doing that. Damn. Paw? Paw. I can't say that. Nope. 'Tis but a flesh wound. Strishel. Streel. Blah, 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 blah. Who would eat 30 sack lunches? Motherfucker! Why can't you speak, woman? Fucking shit. Alvin, Simon, Theodore. Do, 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 do. God, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to get that out of my face. It's like really, really coming down. It makes me want to go take a nap. Okay. Randomly? I don't like that word. Is strange? Stranger Things. When is that coming back? Oh my god, I need season 5 to be happening right now.